It began with a signal no one could explain, a low, rhythmic pulse echoing from beneath the frozen miles of Antarctica. Scientists thought it was ice movement, until the frequency matched no natural pattern ever recorded. What they found below the continent wasn't ice, or stone, or any known element on Earth. It was something else, something ancient, and alive in its own way. What if human civilization didn't start where we thought it did? What if our species had forgotten its own origin story? And what if Antarctica holds the last evidence of a forgotten world, buried in secrecy for 12,000 years? The discovery that followed would fracture the timeline of history itself, forcing every archaeologist and historian to question who or what came before us. By dawn, the storm had cleared, leaving behind a ghostly calm. Eleanor's mind replayed the images from the scanner again and again. That perfect circle, that impossible symmetry. Malik argued it could be basalt or meteorite fragments, but even he couldn't ignore the pulsing energy that had surged through the drill moments before the blackout. Something down there was emitting power, consistent, rhythmic, and intelligent. They prepared a deeper probe, unsure whether they were chasing discovery or danger. The ice beneath them had been untouched for over 10 millennia, yet somehow, something below seemed aware of their presence. Hours later, as the second probe descended, the signal returned, stronger, sharper, as if responding to them. The readings showed temperature variations impossible for the depth he'd reached. Eleanor's pulse quickened. This wasn't just metal. The structure seemed to generate heat and magnetic waves, forming a pattern eerily similar to a human heartbeat. Malik stared silently at the data feed, unable to deny what he saw. Whatever was buried beneath them wasn't dormant. It was awake. The hum soon became a vibration, subtle at first, then strong enough to rattle the glass panels. Eleanor clutched the edge of the table, feeling the rhythm deep in her chest. The camp's generator lights flickered as power surged. Malik shouted to cut the drill, but before the command went through, the vibration stopped abruptly, and everything fell silent. Then, through the monitor feed, the structure beneath the ice emitted a single flash, a blinding pulse that burned its outline into the display. The pulse vanished as quickly as it came, leaving the camp in darkness once more. Outside, the ice cracked audibly, a deep, rolling echo that traveled for miles. Eleanor and Malik exchanged terrified glances. They had reached something that didn't want to be reached. As the wind howled again through the valley, a soft, mechanical hum began to rise from the drill pit, no longer random, but deliberate, like a code waiting to be understood. Whatever slept beneath Antarctica had just awakened. By the second night, the camp was silent except for the groaning wind and the faint pulse that seemed to rise through the ice. The team had drilled nearly 2 miles deep, but the signal came from farther still. Eleanor's hands trembled as she examined the magnetic readings. They formed patterns, repeating every 11 minutes, almost like language. Malik wanted to stop, claiming they were tampering with something that wasn't meant to be disturbed. But Eleanor couldn't look away. If this was proof of intelligent design predating humanity, she couldn't walk from it. Beneath the frozen miles, the pulse echoed again, louder, like an ancient heartbeat calling them closer. Eleanor's voice trembled as she proposed a descent, a direct expedition into the ice shaft toward the anomaly. The others objected, but her conviction overpowered their fear. Malik finally agreed to lead the descent team, his experience in subterranean navigation invaluable. They suited up in thermal gear and equipped the capsule drill with sensors, lights, and recording equipment. The hum beneath their feet now pulsed in sync with their hearts. As the capsule door sealed and the winch began lowering them into the darkness, Eleanor realized that they weren't descending into history. They were falling into something far older than time itself. The capsule descended through translucent layers of ice that seemed almost alive. Strange bubbles and dark streaks passed by, frozen in patterns that looked disturbingly deliberate. The radio crackled with static voices fading in and out as they went deeper. Malik adjusted the oxygen valve while Eleanor stared at the sonar feed. Then she saw it. A faint outline of an entrance. A perfect arch embedded in the ice. Impossibly smooth. Her breath caught. Nature could not have made this. The machine creaked as the capsule came to rest on a ledge above the massive metallic doorway buried in crystalline frost. When the capsule stabilized, Eleanor reached for her helmet and activated her camera light. They stepped out into the frozen cavern, their boots crunching on the untouched floor. The air was strangely warm. Steam curled around their faces as they approached the structure's base. Malik ran his gloved hand across the metallic surface. It was smooth as glass, humming faintly beneath his touch. Then, without warning, symbols ignited across the wall in a serpentine pattern, lighting the cavern in radiant gold. The hum intensified, echoing through their bodies. For the first time, Eleanor felt fear, not of what they might find, but of what might already be awake. Eleanor raised her hand toward the glowing wall, the light intensifying with every movement. Malik tried to stop her, but the wall responded. A narrow seam opened silently, revealing a tunnel beyond. Warm air poured out, carrying a faint scent of ozone and something older than any traceable civilization. She turned to Malik, her voice barely audible over the echoing hum. "This isn't natural," she whispered. He nodded grimly. "No," he said. "It's a doorway." The light dimmed for a moment, then flared once more as if beckoning them forward. The ice around them cracked faintly, whispering of secrets long buried beneath the frozen continent. Eleanor stepped cautiously through the opening, her headlamp slicing through the darkness beyond. The air grew warmer with each step, and droplets of water dripped from the melting ceiling. Malik followed closely, his breathing steady but tense. The tunnel walls shimmered faintly, like metal veins running through translucent ice. As they moved deeper, their radios filled with bursts of strange static, not random but rhythmic, like coded pulses trying to speak. Then the tunnel widened suddenly, revealing a vast chamber stretching beyond the reach of their lights. At the center stood a massive sphere, suspended in midair, rotating slowly and glowing with pale blue light. For a moment, neither could move. They weren't inside a cave anymore. They were standing within something built and alive. The sphere pulsed once, sending a soft vibration through the air. Lights flickered across its surface like neurons firing in a living brain. Eleanor stepped closer, scanning it with her handheld sensor. The readings were impossible. Its energy output was stable, self-generating, and ancient beyond measurement. Malik muttered that no human technology could survive that long. Yet this one thrived beneath miles of ice. Then the pulse intensified, and faint holographic lines projected outward, forming symbols in midair. Eleanor reached toward them. The symbols shifted, rearranging into what looked like star maps, but none matched modern constellations. These were skies from another time, skies humanity was never meant to see. Malik whispered that they should go back, but Eleanor couldn't stop watching as the holograms shifted again, this time showing structures, cities, and humanoid figures, unlike any species known to science. Their faces were elongated, their eyes vast and luminous. The images dissolved and reformed into fragments of writing, looping endlessly. Then a final projection appeared, a human hand pressed against a metallic wall, identical to the one they had opened. Her voice cracked as she said, "They were here before us." Malik's silence said more than words ever could. The truth was too large, too terrifying to name. Whatever civilization had built this, humanity might not be its first experiment. The temperature began to rise, fogging their visors as the structure emitted a deeper resonance. Malik backed away, shouting that the readings were spiking, but Eleanor stood rooted, transfixed. The floor beneath them trembled, and the sphere's surface cracked open, revealing a swirling core of golden plasma. Symbols raced across the walls faster than their eyes could follow. Then, through the roar of energy, a sound emerged. Not a hum, not a machine, but a voice. It spoke in tones beyond language, vibrating directly in their minds. Eleanor gasped, hearing fragments of words that felt both alien and familiar. Return. Awaken. Remember? Then, as suddenly as it began, the light faded. The sphere sealed itself, and the chamber went silent once again. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, gasping for air, her mind racing with the voice that still echoed inside. Malik knelt beside her, shaking his head in disbelief. They had awakened something, or perhaps it had awakened them. Above, the ice cracked faintly, as though the continent itself was reacting. Eleanor whispered, "This changes everything." Malik looked upward through the frost ceiling, his eyes wide with realization. "No," he said quietly. "It already has." The pulse returned, deeper now, as if spreading through the earth beneath their feet. When Eleanor and Malik returned to the surface, the world above seemed to have changed. The air was unnaturally still, and the sky shimmered faintly with magnetic ribbons even in daylight. Communications with the main base were gone. Their instruments recorded massive geomagnetic disturbances spreading outward from the coordinates of the buried chamber. Eleanor tried to rationalize, but her thoughts kept echoing with the same three words she'd heard beneath the ice: return. Awaken. Remember. Malik monitored the radar in silence until the static suddenly shifted into rhythmic bursts, identical to the pulse I'd recorded below. Whatever had awakened beneath Antarctica was now reaching beyond it, and something was answering back. By nightfall, global channels began reporting strange anomalies, compass failures, electrical malfunctions, and glowing storms visible from orbit. Satellite feeds flickered and died one by one. Eleanor's laptop still displayed faint readings from the sphere's energy signature, but the signal was growing stronger by the minute. Malik watched the screen with clenched fists as he realized the epicenter was expanding, resonating beneath the entire southern ice shelf. He spoke quietly. "It's not just waking up, it's spreading." For the first time, Eleanor understood. They hadn't found an artifact. They had triggered a system, one that might have been waiting eons to be reactivated. The storm hit without warning. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing through the base and ripping open tents. Equipment scattered across the ice as flashes of green lightning illuminated the night. Eleanor and Malik struggled to secure the generator, their voices drowned in the roar. In the distance, the ice split open with a thunderous crack, releasing plumes of vapor that glowed from within. The ground trembled violently. Eleanor fell to her knees as the vibrations aligned perfectly with the pulse. She realized the sphere wasn't just transmitting energy. It was rewriting the planet's magnetic field. The Earth itself was shifting to remember something it had long forgotten. When the storm subsided, silence returned. Not the natural kind, but a charged stillness that felt alive. Malik checked the readings again, but all instruments were blank. The magnetic poles had fluctuated and then stabilized into a new configuration. Satellites across the globe were aflying. Eleanor stared at the frozen horizon, sensing that the world had subtly shifted, as if the axis of reality itself had been nudged. Then her radio flickered. Through waves of static, a voice emerged. Faint, distorted, yet unmistakably human. "This is Outpost Kappa. We saw your signal. We found something too." The words sent a chill down her spine. Antarctica wasn't the only place. Something had awakened. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The glow beneath the ice pulsed like a heartbeat, visible now even through the cracks outside the camp. Malik recorded the signal patterns, noticing they had changed. No longer chaotic, but forming a precise repeating sequence. It was a message. As the pulse intensified, the ice beneath them vibrated and distant thunder rolled across the horizon. Eleanor whispered the words that had haunted her since the descent. Return. Awaken. Remember. Malik's eyes widened as the realization dawned. The message wasn't coming from below anymore. It was being broadcast across the sky. The awakening had begun. By the following day, the signal had reached orbit. Satellites across every continent began to transmit the same repeating code before shutting down completely. Power grids failed in sequence, communications blacked out, and compasses across the southern hemisphere began spinning wildly. Eleanor stared at her receiver as it played the identical tone emitted by the sphere below the ice, one continuous hum broken by rhythmic pulses. Malik tracked the frequency manually, his expression grim. The same signal was now being detected from deep ocean trenches and mountain caverns worldwide. Whatever was beneath Antarctica wasn't alone. It had awakened others like it, hidden across the planet for millennia, as if the Earth itself were remembering its true architecture. Far above Antarctica, astronauts aboard the International Space Station reported seeing arcs of light curving across the Earth's surface like veins of energy spreading from the poles. Eleanor listened to the transmission before it was abruptly cut. The phenomenon wasn't just electromagnetic. It was atmospheric, geological, and possibly biological. Malik theorized that the buried structures might be part of a planetary system older than humanity, perhaps even responsible for the survival of life after ancient cataclysms. Eleanor looked toward the horizon where the aurora flared unnaturally bright and whispered, "Maybe they never left. Maybe they built all of this for the first time." Malik couldn't argue. Governments across the world scrambled for answers. Emergency broadcasts confirmed identical discoveries beneath Greenland, the Himalayas, and the Pacific floor. Vast circular structures identical in shape to the Antarctic sphere. Each emitted the same pulse, growing in unison, synchronizing as if forming a single global heartbeat. Eleanor's face paled as she realized the implications. These weren't remnants of a lost civilization. They were components of something designed to reactivate. Malik recorded the rhythm, overlaying each frequency. The result formed a single, unified sequence. A countdown. The question wasn't what was waking up. It was when it would be fully awake. Us in the northeast forth. And how? And I see seemed to runnings. The countdown accelerated. Magnetic readings spiked beyond measurable limits as the ice cracked violently beneath their camp. Eleanor and Malik packed data drives and recordings, determined to send them north before the signal reached critical mass. The radio from Outpost Kappa came alive again. The voice panicked, shouting that their entire ice shelf was collapsing into light. The transmission cut to static, followed by a deep tremor that rolled through the frozen ground. Malik shouted over the noise that they had to leave immediately, but Eleanor stood frozen, staring into the distance where a golden column of light erupted from the horizon. The sky rippled, as if the atmosphere itself was warping. Whoosh! The beam faded, leaving the world in eerie silence. Power returned briefly, just long enough for Eleanor to send their final message to any satellite still receiving. We found them. They were here before us. They built the planet's memory. Then the light inside the base flickered out once more. Malik looked to the horizon where faint columns of gold now shimmered across the edges of the Earth. Whatever the spheres were, they had connected, forming a planetary network that was no longer dormant. Eleanor whispered, "It wasn't a discovery. It was a signal home." Above them, the aurora flared one final time, illuminating Antarctica in a blinding wave of color as the ice groaned like a living thing, awakening from sleep. The Earth's magnetic field rippled like liquid light. Satellites still in orbit captured images of luminous streams rising from oceans and deserts alike, converging toward Antarctica in spiraling formation. Inside the fractured outpost, Eleanor and Malik watched their instruments come back to life. Though no longer obeying human commands, readings appeared in unknown symbols, that shifted faster than they could interpret. Eleanor whispered that it was communicating, not with them, but with the planet. The pulse had become a global rhythm, beating in perfect synchronization with the Earth's core. Malik realized in disbelief that the magnetic poles were no longer natural. They were being reprogrammed. Humanity's oldest foundation, its planet, was under intelligent control again. Eleanor replayed her recordings from the sphere, isolating the hidden frequencies buried beneath the main pulse. When slowed down, the tones formed patterns resembling language, primitive, haunting, but structured. Malik analyzed the modulation and discovered something shocking. Each sequence corresponded to coordinates, pinpointing locations where ancient myths originated: Sumeria, Egypt, the Andes, and the Himalayas. The message wasn't random. It was a network map. The structures beneath the ice were part of a planetary system built to store knowledge. A library not written in stone, but coded in the magnetic field itself. Humanity's myths, their gods, their origins. All part of a memory that was never human to begin with. The following hours blurred into chaos. Global transmissions resumed briefly. Images of massive energy pillars rising from ancient ruins. Desert plateaus glowing in the night, and oceanic trenches lighting up like circuits. Governments went silent. Satellites transmitted only fragments before disappearing into static. Malik stared at the footage, whispering that the planet itself was waking, restoring a system dormant for tens of millennia. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the handprint she had seen in the hologram, the same shape as her own. Maybe, she said quietly, we were rent their creation. Maybe we're their descendants. Malik turned to her, his voice breaking through the silence. Then what happens when they come back? That night, the sky over Antarctica transformed. The aurora expanded, filling the atmosphere with luminous symbols visible from space. The wind carried a low harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate in every living thing. Eleanor felt it deep inside her bones. A frequency that didn't harm but awakened memory, fragments of images and sensations that weren't hers. Cities of light, towers of crystal, beings who moved through sound instead of speech. Malik fell to his knees, overwhelmed, whispering that it was rewriting their DNA, reawakening whatever had been dormant since the beginning. For the first time, humanity was hearing the voice of its forgotten origin, and remembering who had once walked this earth before them. Eleanor's voice trembled as she recorded her final log. If anyone receives this, the activation wasn't destruction, it's restoration. The earth remembers. Malik stood behind her, his gaze fixed on the glowing horizon. Across the world, the same light rose from oceans and deserts, from mountains and ruins, converging into a global network of memory. The signal pulsed one last time, steady and calm, then vanished into silence. For a brief moment, everything was still. Then, the stars shifted. The constellations realigned into new patterns, not random, but deliberate, forming a single shape visible from pole to pole. It was a symbol of unity, a message written across the sky that humanity had never truly been alone. Days passed, yet night never truly returned to Antarctica. The sky shimmered constantly with radiant light, as if the planet had drawn its own curtain of remembrance. Eleanor wandered outside the ruins of the base, every sound muted beneath the glow. She no longer heard the hum beneath the ice. It was gone, absorbed into the pulse of the earth itself. Malik stood beside her, exhausted but calm. The world had changed, not through destruction but through revelation. Humanity's timeline had fractured and rewritten itself. All ancient myths, all forgotten symbols, all the stories of gods descending from the stars. They weren't legends anymore. They were memories of those who built this place. Antarctica wasn't the end of the world. It was the beginning. Across the globe, news networks struggled to interpret what was happening. Satellite footage revealed colossal circular patterns forming on the ocean's surface, visible only under infrared light, identical to the ones discovered beneath Antarctica. Scientists, philosophers, and theologians spoke of reactivation, renewal, and revelation. Eleanor's recordings were now being broadcast worldwide, her voice narrating what had happened. She didn't claim discovery, she called it a return. They never vanished, she said. They became the Earth. Malik listened quietly, his gaze distant. Humanity was no longer alone. It was part of something infinitely older, a living archive designed to preserve life's memory across ages of extinction. Then came the quiet realization. The activation had changed humanity itself. People around the world began reporting vivid dreams of places they had never seen. Crystalline cities, skies filled with dual suns, and oceans that glowed from beneath. Eleanor experienced it too. Flashes of knowledge not learned but remembered. Languages she couldn't have known whispered in her mind. Malik theorized that the magnetic reconfiguration had unlocked dormant regions of human DNA, reawakening ancient genetic memory. The line between myth and science blurred forever. Evolution had not been random. It had been guided, and now its architects were guiding again. At the edge of the world, the last transmission came from an orbiting satellite, a panoramic view of Earth now surrounded by a faint halo of golden light. The polar regions pulsed like the planet's heart, connected by radiant lines running through continents and oceans. Eleanor stood outside with Malik, listening to the rhythmic vibration traveling through the ground. It was no longer chaotic. It was peaceful, like a heartbeat settling into perfect rhythm. Malik said softly, "It's complete." Eleanor nodded, tears forming as she whispered, "Maybe it always was. We just forgot how to hear it." The wind carried their voices across the endless white, blending them with the quiet pulse of a reborn Earth. In her final journal entry, Eleanor spoke not as a scientist, but as a witness. "We always looked to the stars to find where we came from," she said, "but the truth was buried here, beneath our own feet, waiting for us to remember." The ancient architects had left their legacy not in ruins, but in the living memory of the planet, encoded in stone, ice, and DNA. Humanity wasn't their replacement. It was their continuation. As the aurora shimmered one last time, Eleanor closed her eyes and felt the warmth of the earth beneath her hands. Somewhere far below, the spheres pulsed once more, not as warnings, but as greetings. The forgotten civilization of Earth had finally spoken again through its last creation, humankind.